Um, okay. Hi everyone. My name is Gareth. I'm a documentation manager um, at a small kind of API management company. Um, but what my job is basically to run the doc site. And what does that mean? It means that I have to come up with processes and structures to ensure that um, that the documentation is findable, scannable, and readable, basically. And so I'm going to take you through kind of what I call find, scan, read, a structured approach to documentation creation and improvement. So a kind of writer focused way of handling workload. So perfect. So the problem that I was trying to solve was kind of two pronged. Creating a doc site and improving a doc site is scary and overwhelming, and there's no point in trying to sugarcoat it. If you're like a first time documentation manager or a lone writer, um, a major issue is knowing what to do, basically. Like for me, I came from the big corporate world where there was loads of technical writers, all the processes existed, it ran like a machine. And then when you go from that then to a situation where you have to build that machine, it can be quite scary. And your anxiety may peak just a little bit. So that was one of the problems that I set out to solve. And then the other one was that as an SME kind of for documentation, sometimes we need to translate what we do and the impact that it has to leadership and people outside of our field. So I asked myself, how do I create a plan that is both simple but impactful and provides leadership with a roadmap that they can follow? So how do I translate and sell the dream of documentation and how we're going to make the doc site better? Those were the two problems that I set out to solve as I started on this kind of whole journey. Then on top of that, then another problem that I kind of found was sometimes people focus too much on the individual pages. Now, I'm not saying that focusing on individual pages is wrong, it's completely valid because the content on that page has to be accurate. But something that I noticed when getting feedback and collecting kind of feedback from both internal and external users of the doc site is that they were focused on kind of the minute problems of individual pages. So you'd get feedback like, I want more code examples to make it work. I want more use case tutorials to show how I can actually use this feature, not just what it is, and in real life scenarios. I just want more guides in general. We don't cover this feature, this use case, or this persona. Um, and it was just more, more, more. And an issue that I found with that was that gets very overwhelming. If you're listening to kind of all this feedback and trying to make everyone happy, you end up down a rabbit hole. And unfortunately, that rabbit hole then leads to stress. And by trying to keep everyone happy, unfortunately, you keep nobody happy. So I was trying to think of a way that I could approach documentation and make a roadmap that I could follow that was impactful and that was simple enough. That it didn't have to be complex, it could be easily adapted, it could be easily scalable. So, the reality of the situation when trying to figure out how to improve a doc site is you have to look at it holistically. And there is an average time before your doc site is judged, before people even get to the content, before they even submit the feedback. And that average time is about 5 seconds. So when somebody lands on a doc site, they have about 5 seconds, and then they probably open a sport ticket or they will already say this doc site is bad. And no matter what happens next, nothing's going to change their mind. After that, you have about 10 to 20 seconds then to actually show them what they need. So realistically, you have about 30 seconds altogether to produce this holistic approach and user experience for both internal and external users, which is no time at all. So I was like, how do I make sure those 5 seconds are the most impactful that they can be? How do I make it that people who land on the doc site, either through the homepage or through an individual page, um, how do I make that the best user experience for them within that 5 seconds? So, what was the goal? The goal is, with this strategy that I'm about to show you, is I want to hit the 90%, not the 10%. So what you'll find is that I will be talking about kind of methodologies, strategies, frameworks that may seem a bit vague and idealistic. The idea that we have to kind of create generalized solutions to these problems. By focusing on the individual page, you're only hitting the 10%. And if you're only hitting 10% of users, like say you have 10 users, you're only hitting one person. If you have 100 users, you're only hitting 10 people. So the way that I looked at this whole model was that there had to be a way to hit the 90%, 9 out of 10 users, and make their experience better. Because if you create a holistic user experience rather than just focusing on the individual docs pages, what I find is that kind of the feedback that you get changes. It gets more positive and then it becomes more actionable as well. So it goes from very vague feedback like we need more guides to, hey, this code example is wrong, or we're missing this specific page. And you find that when you start aiming for the 90% and implementing measures that hit the 90%, that you get more actionable feedback rather than just fix the docs. So that is something that we're thinking about whenever you're approaching documentation in general, I find, is what can I do to hit 9 out of 10 users? Yes, you're still missing one, but having 9 happy users rather than one happy user is probably better. It is better. You need to, that's kind of the way that it needs to be. So the find, scan, read model. This is something that I originally read about in an article produced by the Nielsen Norman Group, NN Group. And they talked about how users approach documentation and documentation sites. And they talk about how, first of all, users have to find it, then they scan it for relevance, and then they read it. So, like, the first step is always find it. Can I find the right page? So, to answer this question, if people are asking it, you have to increase page discoverability. So that's like through SEO, information architecture, navigations, to make it super easy to find that when I land on a doc site or a user lands on mine, that they can go within a few clicks, they get to the page that they want. So that's the way that I kind of look at that. It's, can I find the right page? And I even use this myself when I'm trying to find things on doc sites that I've worked on. The first thing I always do is, where is it? Can we find it? Can users find it? Then, of course, they scan it. So, am I on the right page? So, the way that the world's kind of moving with like headings and trying to make headings as concise as possible, sometimes you might have duplication. So, it's like you're looking for a specific page about some topic, and then you land on that page about some topic. But just because the heading is what you believe that you're looking for, the next stage then is to work on, am I on the right page? So that is increasing content relevance and confidence. And what I mean by that then is, like, you use headings and diagrams to show the user straight away, I'm on the right page and this is exactly what I'm going to be taught. I'm going to be taught about a concept, or I'm going to be shown a task, or this is a tutorial. So they know within that kind of 3 seconds that they land on a page that they know, okay, I found the right one. And that's kind of vital when, especially when you're coming through search engines, I find, or just in-house search, like on your doc site. And that's how users usually find it these days. We're kind of moving away from manual navigation of like left-hand navs or top-level navs. So the scan is crucial that people know I have landed on the right page. And it provides confidence then to both the user and yourself, knowing, and to the page, knowing that everything is as it should be. And then the last part is probably the one that everyone is probably most familiar with, is the read kind of section. So can I understand this page? So increase understanding and task success. So that means like, is it written correctly? Are the code examples correct? Is it legible? Is it using plain language? Is it missing content? Is there too much content? Is it chunked correctly? All those questions need to be asked here. And this is kind of the last stage of it. So they've found the document, they've scanned it for what they need, and now they're reading the section that they think is relevant to them. So by the goal of this model is to get the user from the initial I've had a problem all the way down to I found the exact place that solves my issue and increases and solves my issue and increases my success rate. So that's kind of the goal because like let's be honest, like most of the time when somebody lands on a dock site, they're already having an issue. So that means that they're already kind of in a frustrated state, in my opinion, or they're trying to solve some sort of problem. So it's like, oh, I'm already having an issue with your product or service, or it's, I'm having an issue and I think your product or service can solve that. So it's important to try and make this whole user experience as good as it can be. And if it is, like, for example, a prospect, what I find this model is really good for is by providing a really strong user experience, that is a great pitch then for um, your service or product, thinking, oh God, their doc site was really easy to navigate. They put a lot of effort into it. I was able to scan it and read it correctly. And that kind of builds confidence in your team and in the company as well. So, what I want to talk about now is how I present this as a roadmap. So, this is all well and good trying to explain that this is the impact of it. Like the users will find it, they'll scan it, they'll read it. But what we all know is then we have to sell the dream to leadership. I've often been told that like as you like become like a lone writer and a documentation manager, you also become a salesman. So you have to sell the dream of documentation and you have to sell it to leadership in a way that you'll get buy-in. That is something that like especially when I moved from the big corporate world kind of into a smaller company, what I found was a skill that I had to really perfect was selling the dream, selling what is documentation, its importance, and how we get there. So you can kind of break it down into kind of what I like three phases, which are exactly what you think they are. I don't think these will be of any surprise to anyone. Like phase one is fine, ensure users can find the content. So this would mean like if you're building a doc site from scratch, the first thing that you do is the information architecture and the SEO optimization. So for search engines. Um, and you show them like this is what I believe the nav should look like, and you show them this is what I believe the search engine should look like. These are the tools that we need. And if you're improving a doc site, the first thing that you do is, if you inherit it, is look at the information architecture to say, can I find what I'm looking for? How is this divided up? And how can it be better? And there's a number of ways to do that. And I won't go into the details of all those different methodologies because we don't have time, but that's always the first step. And it's something that I've done in the past with other writers on my team, that we kind of like reorganize the information architecture to ensure that people could find the content faster. And we move pages around and we built new sections, divided it up differently. And what I will also say is like this section, like if you are improving a doc site, that there may be some feedback that, oh, you can no longer find this page. It's not in the place I was expecting. And that's okay as well. But what you'll find, what the goal is, and in an ideal world, is that both internal and external users will see that you've changed the navigation, but they'll think, okay, the page has moved, but I was able to find it much easier. And there's a lot of like solutionizing involved here unless you have access to like user research, which I don't think a lot of us would have that kind of power. But if you have the ability to talk to internal and external stakeholders, always take it. So then phase two is ensure your users can understand every page at a glance. So this is like the use of style guides, templating, making sure every page is the same. So that means that no matter where a user lands on their doc site, on a doc site, they know exactly what they're going to find. Like if it's a task that they need to solve, then they know like, oh, I'll always expect to see this section and that section, and I'll exactly know what to do no matter where I am. And then, of course, the last phase is read, ensure users can understand the content. So that means the actual like words on the page, the code examples. But what you find is this roadmap can be easily broken down and shows kind of the high level user experience. And it's something that you can easily translate up to leadership to show them how it will be done. So you can use a slide like this just to say, this is what I'm going to do. Or then, as I'll show you in the next slide, is like you can break it down even further into like a basic roadmap. Now, I am speaking in ideals here, and every company is different. So, what I wanted to do when I was kind of working out how to create this kind of like find, scan, read kind of idea into a roadmap, um, I wanted to make it easily adaptable. So, I didn't want to create a rigid structure, but it could be something like this. It could be Q1, I'll focus on finding the information. So, that's information architecture and SEO. And you might maybe that could be 2 quarters. Maybe your information architecture is enormous and you have thousands of pages that all require search engine optimization. But you get the idea. Q2 is scan, so I'm going to make templates and style guides for all of the new features that I'm writing, so that every time a new page is created, at the very least, it follows a very specific pattern, and then slowly over time, that pattern gets adopted, and more pages follow that. Or if you're starting from scratch, at least then you know, okay, all my pages will look the exact same. So no matter where users land on my doc site, they'll know exactly how to scan it to see that they are getting the information that they need. What what I've put here is like read takes up 2 quarters because especially if you're improving a doc site, what I find is this takes the longest because you have to really think about like the words on the page, coming up with like grammar and styling rules, code example rules, making sure everything conforms to the templates, updating code examples. Or and then you might think, oh God, like we only have 1 page on this feature, but it can do so much more. So I'm going to write a couple of more user guides for that as well. So it really depends on the complexity that you're facing in your day-to-day job. But you get the idea that you spread it out and you show to your leadership that these are the exact things I'm going to hit. And you should find by like the end of Q1 will be ranked higher in search engines. By the end of Q1 as well, we'll also have that you'll be able to find every page on the doc site within 3 clicks, for example. By the end of Q3, for example, all of our code examples will be up to date. So you can really break it down into small actionable goals that your leadership can see and you can measure and track yourself. And like you can build out KPIs as well. Because that's something else that I was really thinking about is like one question that I was asked is like, how do you build KPIs for a docs team and how do you build them for like basic documentation in general? And this is a really good way to break out those KPIs if that's what you've been asked to do and making sure that we hit those KPIs every quarter. So like, for example, I put this down as a year. It might take 2 years. It might take 2 quarters because you're starting from scratch and you know the IA will be really simple because you only have one product. It's really adaptable and scalable as well. I feel like depending on your team size as well, you could easily like increase velocity or decrease velocity if you have a smaller team. and you can really break out those actionable goals and adjust the roadmap as needed. And what I find then is what happens is you have a massive impact on the customer base. What we were talking about, like with that goal of hitting the 90% over the 10%, what happens is each quarter you kind of go in this kind of triangular fashion. So each quarter, like quarter one, when you work on finding the documentation, that hits basically every single user because everyone has to find the docs. That's just the way it is. So you'll hit everyone at that point. By Q2, when you're creating those templates and scanning, you're still probably going to hit 90%, but not all of that 90% are going to land on every single page. They're only going to land on the pages that they need. So depending on how you structure it, if you think, okay, I'm going to do like, this is our most used feature, so I will do that first. So that's 60%. And then as you move down and say, I'm going to conform each page to the template, you kind of hit less and less viewed pages. And then when you think about like the kind of read element, if you're doing that in like Q3 and 4, you'll hit less and less because you're focusing on the individual page then rather than like the holistic user experience. And the way that I always look at it is like you can track it through like page views and clicks. That you can track it through, sorry, lost my train of thought. Clicks and views that you then can start mapping out priorities then and say like, okay, I'm going to update this page first. And then that will hit like 40% of the users. And then as you go down that priority list, it might be like 2 out of our 10 users read this page, but you still have to do it because you have to conform every template to every page to the template. But then the code examples are up to date. The phrasing and terminology is consistent. So yeah, you create a holistic experience, but you do heat less and less, but you become more refined as you go down. But that is the general impact that I see on the kind of the strategy side. And that's something that you can show to leadership that if they think, God, like, I don't know if like our navigation's important, I'd rather you update the code examples. You can show them kind of, but like everyone has to find the docs page. Not everyone needs the code example. Well, they do if they land on it, and that is specifically what they're looking for. But if you think, oh, I'm just a prospect, gauging if your product or service is worth my time, finding and using the doc site is going to be more important to them necessarily than the code example. So now you're all probably wondering, how do you go from strategy to implementation? So I'm going to, in this section, what I'm going to do is kind of give you like hints and tips. What I found worked when I was trying to do this myself, and what didn't work, and hopefully you can implement it yourself and adapt it. It'll be kind of high level because I don't want to overwhelm you, and obviously we only have an hour, and I want to leave time for questions. But of course, we can go into more depth if you need. So like phase one is fine. So the focus here is like information architecture and SEO. Now, in the company that I'm currently at, our primary focus is our information architecture because we are very fortunate that we have an SEO specialist that we work with that handles the entire company's SEO strategy. So we focus on the information architecture and getting people to where they need to be. And a phrase that I find is useful is if users cannot find a page, the content on that page does not matter. So you might think like you might get from leadership from, I don't know, from product, from engineering, no, we need to update that singular page. And then it gets buried like, I know, 5 clicks deep into an app. Nobody's going to find that. Or it might have a title that is just simply not relevant. So the issue with that then is that like all that is kind of wasted effort, in my opinion, because nobody's going to find it. So who's going to know it's there? It's like when you shove something into the back of your closet and you're like, oh, I'll wear this shirt in 3 months' time, and then it's in the back of your closet, and then you do your spring clean, and you're like, oh God, I never wore that shirt ever again because it was out of sight, out of mind. So the way that I look at this is information architecture is the map. So this is how people get there. This is how they get to their goal. You have to get them to the specific point on the map where they'll find the answer. And SEO helps them find the map. So you land on a search engine and you're like, I need this product's docs. Without SEO, that will also get buried in the ranking. So you might necessarily find the doc site in general. And then when you land there, you need to make sure that you can navigate it like a map to get there. And that always helped me because when you put it in terms like that, at least for me, like if I had a poor map trying to find my way around, like London, for example, I wouldn't be able to find my way, and I would get frustrated, and I would miss my appointment, and it would not be a good experience. So you have to really sit down and think about this and understand that getting people there is a journey, and your job is to take them on that journey. They will never know that you took them on that journey because we're kind of behind the scenes superheroes, but at least deep down you know you've made a difference. So here are my practical tips. Pick a framework. And what do I mean by a framework? DITA, maybe, like the concept task reference. That might work. The diataxis model, which I'm seeing more and more people adopt. So that's like explanation, how-to guides, tutorial, and reference. Maybe that's something that you need to do. Are you going to create goal-orientated kind of documentation? So how to do X, show me how X works, or I'm trying to do this, help me solve it. Or will it be more feature focused? I have AI agent. Tell me all about it. I have a portal. Tell me all about it. I have this device. Tell me all about it. Or is it going to be persona driven? Like, oh, I have admins, I have users, I have writers. Do I create it for that? Is that how my users want to approach our documentation? And this is where feedback really comes in handy. What I would say is, if you don't have access to like direct user feedback, I would go through your people facing teams. So, like customer success, technical account managers, solution engineers, people who are sitting in front of your customers and prospects on a daily basis. So I would look at that and try and use that kind of knowledge and also kind of look at how it's marketed as well. I always know like we're not marketing people, but if your company is driving a specific framework to say like, oh, hey, we can help you solve your issue if you're an admin or a user or an org leader, maybe that's the way that the doc site needs to be kind of orientated. And what I would say then is also just stick to that framework. Often what you find is sometimes like you pick a framework, but then so many things happen and you kind of let the guardrails down and suddenly it becomes a mix of different kind of personas and models and that just becomes too confusing. What I will say is do not focus on the content of the page. As writers, what I often find is that we are perfectionists. And we often see a really like, at least with me and my team, is we find like a badly written page and you think, God, I just need to fix this. But that's not the goal. And it should not be the goal. And you'll end up not accomplishing anything if you try to fix every page that you come across immediately during this phase. Like I said, feedback from support and people facing teams is golden. But try to remember the goal of this and always keep it in your head if you're going down a rabbit hole is you're trying to get people from we couldn't find the information about X, this feature, this problem, to the information about X is wrong, which I know is a bit pessimistic, but if you're like improving a doc site or even creating from scratch, what that tells you is if you're getting feedback like, oh, this page, the code example didn't work, this page I didn't understand it. But what you do then, and if leadership are going, see, we need you to focus on the page, you just respond with, but they found the page. See, there's a way to like phrase everything. Like the goal of that phase was to get people to that page, not to solve the issue on the page. So I think that's always something good to remember that if you're getting less feedback about I can't find this page, do we have content about X, Y, Z, to X, Y, and Z need to be improved, or we need specific elements improved, you're winning. This is the plan is working. it will get worse before it gets better, but it will get better eventually. So phase two kind of like now is scanning. So this is focusing on page structure and consistency. So if you're a lone writer, this is kind of easy. But if you're on a team, you have to build out like templates and style guides to make sure that there is that consistency. So a rule that I always have is if you're making them read the entire document, you're making them do too much. And what do I mean by that is if I land on a doc site on a specific page, and if I have to read everything to understand if this is what I want, I'm not going to read all that. No user will. We've moved past those days, unfortunately, in the era of social media and shorter attention spans, that we need to show the users at a very high level, this is the page that you need to be on, and you will find this information here. So depending on your information architecture, make sure all your topics and modules are the same. So it's like every concept module looks the same, every task looks the same, every tutorial looks the same. So users can easily jump around and see exactly what they need. I would also say like chunk those pages logically, whatever way that you want, but make sure you keep that chunking consistent throughout the docs. So like, for example, put in an overview of prerequisites, procedure, verification, next steps. So like even at a very high level, if you're only looking at H1s, like that gives me a rough idea of what I'm going to do here. I'm going to learn what it is, what do I need before I start, and the actual task itself, how to make sure I did it correctly, and what do I do next. It's about creating that experience. So I know exactly, okay, X, this is exactly what I'm going to do here. And I can jump to the place that I want. Like, oh, yesterday I built it and it took overnight for it to, I don't know, configure, for example. Now I just need to make sure that it did it correctly. So I'll jump straight to verification to make sure that happens. So like here, you see kind of just where everything is immediately. So that is something that I would say is just keep it as visual and as high level as you can. So the practical steps are start with H1s only. So when you think of like chunking information and using headings to kind of break up walls of text, starting with H1s is probably the best way to go. So like the overview, prereqs, procedure, verification, next steps. That's all that you need to start with. Like, because every page is going to be different in some way. And you can add layers and layers of complexity. But what I found was when myself and my team were doing this is you start like really putting the information together. And it starts really like it may not necessarily be well written, but what you'll find is at least it's chunked in the right way and it's slightly easier to understand. And it gives the user a lot of context to what to expect in that section. And something that I do in this section is I only read the headings and I think, does it make sense? Do I know what I'm going to do here? Do I know what this is going to teach me? Like if I'm on a concept page, what is it? What's the problem I'm going to solve? It's going to solve for me. How does it do it? So those kind of ideas that, or if like with a task module, do I know exactly what I'm going to be doing? I've written here like procedure. I don't use it as a title. It's like what we usually do is like installing the product with Docker or like configuring the platform with this feature. So we kind of guide readers exactly to where they need to be, and that kind of boosts SEO along the way because you're using keywords like on-page SEO to make sure that you're boosting the rankings a little bit more as well. So the way that I kind of do is only start with H1s. It's really less overwhelming. Avoid complexity as much as you can. Just keep it simple. And that's the best way to do it. You can add complexity later. And of course, remember the goal of this whole section then is you go then, so we've gone from I couldn't find the page to the information on this page is wrong, that when you start chunking these things, even at the H1 level, you go from the information about X is wrong to the information in the in X section of Y page is wrong. So that means like you're starting to get more actionable feedback and it's getting more and more specific, which is exactly what you need. So that means that then you know exactly like, oh, the overview didn't tell me what I wanted to do, what this page was going to do. Okay, cool. We'll create a ticket and we'll rewrite the overview. And then, so now you have a really clear action out of that, and you know exactly what to do next. So it gets way more specific, and you get less overwhelmed other than just fix page. You get like that clear action that you can fix. So for phase three, read, it's content quality and clarity. And this is the phase I kind of spend the least time on when I talk about this. Because I feel it's something that like it's kind of really taught and like at these courses about technical writing in degrees about that have technical writing, they focus on the page. But what I will say is if you do not have page quality, you have a bug. Like it's that simple. Often like it's a kind of an adapted version of that phrase that I imagine some people will know, which is um if you don't have docs, you have a bug because nobody knows how to use the feature and will probably break their system. So it's really interesting to kind of think about it that way and understand that when you get to this specific page or like phase, this is what happens next, and you need to focus on the quality. So that's like the spelling, the grammar, I can't remember who read it, who wrote it, but I remember hearing this phrase called trust breakers. So people often think like, oh, the code examples need to be correct, the guides need to be technically accurate. But then if the spelling and grammar is off, you've already broken their trust because, oh, you can't form a sentence. So why should I trust that you can help me solve my issue? So it's also something very important to keep in mind. Consistent terminology. This is a good one if you're looking for like a company level initiative, is to link up with product and marketing and understand what are we pushing to our users? What terminology are we using? Are we using this phrase or that phrase? What are we calling this? And creating a glossary of terms that you can consistently refer to. Make sure all your examples work and make sure that they're good examples as well. At the moment, what some of my team are doing is we test the documentation as we write it. And what we often find is we catch some bugs that the engineers didn't because we went through it in a way that a user would. And often we're like, oh, and then we'll get a response like, oh, you just need to use this command or you need to do this configuration. And so then we put that into the docs as well. So we create very accurate examples that really boost the confidence in the docs. Focus on process and consistency. What I will say is, oops, didn't mean to click that on. Process and consistency is a godsend. I'm a process person, as you can imagine, in content strategy. So I would focus on process and building process that, like, if you think, oh, I'm a lone writer now, but they told me we might scale up the team, then at least when you build the process, everyone can follow it and you have consistent experience. So the practical tips. What I like to do is theme the problems that I encounter. So is it like code examples are broken? The spelling and grammar is not good enough. It's technically inaccurate, so it just doesn't work. Um, Teaming these problems help you break it down into actionable goals that you can use to say like, okay, I will build, I know, an AI agent that fixes spelling and grammar. I will make sure the code examples that engineering give me work by testing them myself or ensuring that they are tested by somebody. And what I would say is don't fix the problem, build a solution. So don't fix, build. So that's build a process like TLDC, a technical documentation lifecycle, so that writing documents have certain checkpoints to go through before they're published. Maybe you want to build CI/CD pipelines to ensure automation and code examples are up to date. Or maybe you want to build in the world of AI, which we're kind of moving more and more towards, maybe an agent to do it all for you. Maybe that's the way to go and speed up your process and optimize yourself. So I would always say it's like you can fix like every code example, but if you're not building processes and automations to help you along the way, you'll just encounter the same problems again in a week, a day, a month, a year. So building up the processes to ensure that when an issue is fixed, it's fixed forever. And if it breaks, there's something there that will fix it for you, or there's a process to tell you how to fix it at the very least. So those would be kind of my practical tips. And I know I kind of kept it vague, but I wanted to keep it adaptable for everyone. And yeah, that's really it.